Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Hey y'all, happy Sunday. Nice mellow music to calm me down. It's been hectic as heck, but I think we're going to make it. Spring has sprung. We actually got some decent weather last week, and I got a brand new barbecue that is still in the box and right in the middle of the living room that I get to assemble. But that's okay. We'll make it. All right. Today we're going to continue on with texturing, and I'm going to get into vector textures this time. I wanted to try to combine the two last week, but it didn't take me long to realize that the texture toolpath last week was worthy of its own live stream. So we stuck with that. And now we'll get into vector textures. It's possible, I don't know, but it's possible this may extend to next week as well because of a gadget that is available to Aspire and V-carve Pro. That is the texturing toolbox. And it's a pretty cool little gadget. So let me start off by giving a few shout outs here. And first one is going to go to my buddy Bull Shanigan. I'm asked all the time if I do one-on-one tutoring, and I'm just not in a position to do that. So I know a fella, and that's Bull Shanigan. And Steve with Harnell Media has already dropped his website over here in the chat, and there's a link down in the description. Go check Bull out. He's been doing this for years, and he does one-on-one training, everything from the basics on up to some pretty advanced 3D modeling. And you go at your pace. He is very good at what he does. And hit his website, hit that contact us form, and have a chat with Bull. He's a real personable fellow. Got a heart as big all outdoors. And as I said, he's very good at what he does. So that's Bull Shanigan. He also runs a Facebook group for those of you who are on Facebook called The Make. And there's a link to it in the chat over here that Steve has provided for us. There's also a link down in the description box of this video. That's a great group of people. Get in there. They share knowledge, wisdom, methods, tools, techniques, all kinds of stuff, and just occasionally show off a check out what I done type of picture. So it's a good group of people. They're a lot of fun to hang out with. It's a great place to just go and hang out. That's the Make over on Facebook. You won't be sorry. The next shout out I want to give to is Steve Nealon. You know him, you love him. He's a friend, he's a buddy, and he's also the sponsor, Mark Lindsay CNC. This is just us talking here, okay? Sitting here, chilling out, relaxed around the campfire. We're all in this making products. Some of us are making files. Some of you are doing custom sign work. Some of you are manufacturing items that you want to get out in front of the public. There's no better way to do it than with a website. You can set up an e-commerce website with a web store to put your products up there for sale to the public and just start promoting that link to your website, eliminating the middleman. Nobody is taking a commission. Nobody is taking a cut of every sale. All of that good stuff. Steve Nealon can help you with that. If you're a seasoned veteran and you know how to run a website, he can still hook you up. If you've never run a website before and don't know what you're doing, he can hook you up. He's very, very competitively priced. How he does everything he does for that price, I have no idea. But believe me, you can't go wrong. Head over to harneilmedia.com. There's a link in every video on my channel, and it's that way for a reason. He's not only a friend, he's just damn good at what he does. So check it out. Get over there, hit that contact us link, and have a chat with Steve. he'll square you away, believe me. And I want to thank you again, Steve, for sponsoring MarkLindsayCNC.com. Okay. First things first. I want to go ahead and get into Aspire in just a minute, but I want to discuss the difference between vector textures and the texture toolpath. The texture toolpath is there to generate random textures based on the criteria you enter into it, like I demonstrated last week. For those of you who missed last week, I thought I did, but evidently I didn't because I'm looking at the video details now. I'll put a link to last week's live stream where I went through several permutations of using the texturing toolpath. That's all well and good if you want random generated textures as a background for a piece of material or what have you. This week, we're going to get into using vectors to guide those textures. And these can take on many, many shapes. It can take on many, many different permutations. And I'll come up with a good demonstration to show you where you would use this in a real life situation, for example. So let's go ahead and dive into Aspire. And just to make this easy for us to see, what I have here is I have a piece of material that is 48 inches wide in X and 24 inches tall in Y. This process is also a good candidate for tiling if your machine can't cut something this size. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. I see Steve has already got a link to last week's live. There you go. You can go check that out, and I'll put one in the description after we're finished live here. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that. Now, what we're going to be talking about is this icon right here under Create Vectors. It's in the second row, the very last icon. And what this is going to help us do is it's going to help us generate vectors that we can use in the profile toolpath. We can use them in the V-carve toolpath. We can use them in the texture toolpath if we'd like. But it's going to give us a set of vectors that are going to create a texture that we can use. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen the big, huge sculpted panels that people are applying to walls. That is one of the applications. I mean, I've seen them in doctors' offices. I've seen them in banks. Usually it's cut in a high density foam and then that foam is painted, or sometimes it is an artistic painting is made on them. I'm even seeing some smaller panels that were gold leafed. So there is all kinds of stuff going on with these textures. So let's get into the form and see what all's involved with creating these textures. So we'll open up the form here, and I'm just going to start top to bottom. Up here we have the angle. Now, the angle of the texture is which way is this layout going to be on our material? Are we going to run from side to side? Are we going to run from bottom to top, top to bottom? Or are we going to run at some other type of angle out here? I'm going to start with a plain side to side angle. So that'll be 0. All right. Now, spacing. Line spacing is this is going to draw a series of vectors out here. This is the gap between those vectors. How much space do we want between the vectors? Just for this demonstration, I'm going to go for 2 inches. So it's going to draw these vectors 2 inches apart. Now here we have a variation. The variation is if I have this variation set down to 0, these vectors would be spaced evenly 2 inches apart. If I introduce some variation, it's going to, at random, change that spacing. Now, the maximum space will be 2 inches, but depending upon how far I move this slider, that variation could be a heck of a lot, or it can be very little. Now, I'm going to place it at 0 just so we can see what this is going to do. Now, here are the wave parameters. The way this form works is it's based on a waveform, and that's simply that sweeping waveform that you've seen, oh boy, in countless applications. What the amplitude is how high these peaks and valleys are going to go. Yes, AL, like a sine wave, just like that. How high are these peaks and valleys going to go? Right now, it's looking at 2 inches. So from the top of one wave to the bottom of the trough, the distance is going to be 2 inches. The higher the number, the more dramatic that waveform is going to peak and trough. The wavelength is the distance from 0, from one upward and then downward and then back up to 0. So if I have a wavelength of 2 inches, it's going to go up, then back down, then back up to 0, all within a 2-inch distance. Depending upon the piece of material you have here, 2 inches may be too small. Generally speaking, the wavelength, the smaller the number, the tighter those waves are going to be. The larger the number, the more gentle those waves are going to be, the more spread out they are. 2 inches on this piece, I think, is a bit much. So let's go with, this is 48 wide. Let's go for 8 inches wide. Then we have the ability to introduce noise to that wave to make these vectors not perfectly smooth and straight, or we could have them kind of be jagged like a sine wave. I'm going to take it down, the noise down to 0, and then I'll show what introducing noise does separately. Okay, you also have an option here to put vectors on a layer. And that layer can be one that is already created, or it can be a new layer that this form is going to create. So with these parameters set, I'm going to go ahead and click preview, and we'll see what it creates. And we see this pattern of vectors. The height from this peak down to this trough is 2 inches, and the wavelength being from where this crosses 0 to where this comes back up to 0 is 8 inches. Would the plane have to be in the XZ or YZ? The plane, these are 2D vectors. So right now, this is all X and Y. Okay, these are 2D vectors. So we're looking down on our tabletop. We can get into the other type of We can get into other types of modifications like that a little bit later on. But the plane is XY. So let me introduce a little noise so you can see what that does. We're bringing this in to about midway, and I'll preview that, and you see how that made that much noise, made those vectors just jagged all over the place, almost like static. Okay. Bring that back down and preview again, and now we're nice and smooth again. If I, let's see, run my line spacing, if I bring that down to 1 inch, preview that, it adds vectors to make the gap between each vector 1 inch. Okay, then we can add a little bit of noise here, preview that, and it's a lot busier. Let's bring that noise back down here and play with a little bit more. We'll go back to our preview. And I'm going to make my amplitude a little bit taller. Let's make it 3.5 inches. Preview it. And those peaks and valleys have gotten steeper. I still have a wavelength of 8 inches. But now the arcs are higher and the troughs are lower. Let's tighten up that wavelength. Let's go to 6 inches. Preview this, and we have a tighter wave. Okay. We can go in all kinds of different directions from here. So this can take on many shapes and many forms. Now, I'm going to go back to a spacing of 2 inches, and let's go with an amplitude also of 2 inches. And I'm going to go back to a wavelength of 6 inches. No noise. We'll preview this. And I'm going to take this right here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to do some tool pathing with this. So I'll say, okay, I'm going to accept those vectors. And when I select one vector, we see that they are grouped. That's a big help because we don't have to select these vectors anymore. Well, not each individual one. So let's go out here and let's start playing around with a few different bits. Now, Wendell, we were talking about these are 2D vectors, but that doesn't mean the cuts are 2D. The cuts are actually 2D, but there can be some variance in there, depending upon which toolpath you use to carve these vectors. Now, I'm going for a simple, just a real basic pattern here. And I'm going to demonstrate this with a profile toolpath. I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to cut this. Let's go pretty deep. Let's get pretty aggressive. I'm going to go 0.5. And for my tool, I'm going to use a V-bit. In fact, I'm going to use a 0.5625 and 90-degree V-bit. And yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll select that. Now, 99 times out of 100, this is carved in foam. So foam is very forgiving. The material is 3/4 of an inch. Foam is very forgiving. I don't need to be this careful and use 5 passes. So what I can do is I can go in to edit the passes, and let's drop that down to, I'm going a 1/2 inch. That bit will handle a 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to jump down to 2 passes and click OK. So I'm going to do it in 2 passes. I'm going to carve on the vector, and I don't have to do anything down here. So let's go ahead and we'll call this 90-degree V bit. We'll calculate it. And I'm going to change my sheet color to, I'm going to try a solid color white, and we'll see how this looks. And if you can't see, we'll change around, okay? So let's go ahead and let's preview that toolpath and see what we get out of it. And there we go. So we have a sculpted foam panel for hanging on the wall. Now, this particular panel, with this depth, will have straight sides down to where that V starts to carve. And then we have that V-shaped texture in the bottom. It's that way because I had it cut that deep. Now, I can reset the preview, and let's go for 1/2 of that. Let's go back and go for a 1/4 of an inch deep. And edit my passes. We'll do this for this demonstration. We'll do this in a single pass. Then I'll calculate. Now let's preview it and get a better idea of the texture that it's going to leave behind. Actually, Wendell, this is all still 2D. This is all still 2D carving here. And that is the profile we get out of that, which looks actually pretty cool. Zip on back and go to a straight Z view. And we see what we can achieve with that. We've got a lot of flat spots out here, and these are running pretty close together, 2 inches apart, and that might serve a purpose. Now you don't have to use a V-bit. You can use a ball nose bit, or you can get into some pretty crazy things. We're going to use the same vectors. We're going to use another profile toolpath, but instead of using that 90-degree V-bit, I've added a couple of bits here that I do not own yet, but I might. And this is a 2 1/4 inch core box bit from Amana Tools, which means that it's expensive. And we'll select that. Now, remember, this is 2 1/4 inches in diameter, and these are 2 inches apart. So one is going to carve into the other, but that's going to give us some very, very cool texturing patterns. No other changes. You know what? I might, let's leave it at 1/4 of an inch depth and see what that gets. And here we're going to go with 2.125 core box. We'll calculate that. And we'll preview this one. Let's see. This show gets expensive every week. I feel you, Rick. I'm not suggesting you go out and buy it. I'm just showing what is possible. And look at the texture we're coming up with here. It's coming close to carving in between here, and it's leaving large flats out here. Now I have the, because it's such a big bit, I'm using Amana's tool file for this bit. Well, to be honest, Amana didn't have a tool file for this bit. Not yet anyway. So I had to use one of their smaller bits and just copied it over. So yeah, this is a 2 1/8. Yeah, this is a 2 1/8 inch core box bit. Now, again, I'm not suggesting you rush out and buy this. I'm just showing you the options that are available. And we have that texture there. We could even tighten that up a little bit more to where it does overlap and carve each one of these, carve into one another. So yeah, this is very cool. So can you mix this with a molding toolpath to make it more like a sand dune effect? You probably could. You probably could. I have not tried it, but the vector texture tool creates 2D vectors. All you would have to do would be ungroup them and make sure that they're all running in the same direction. You know, you've got all your start points here, and on these little scallops down here, they would all have to be in this running in the same direction. Otherwise, you'd get some odd looking. It may not even work. So yeah, it just creates standard vectors that I could ungroup and play around with. Speaking of which, we could also do something. Let's reset the preview, close the preview mode, and I'm going to go back over here to the drawing tab for just a minute. I'm going to select the vectors. I'm going to tap the letter U on my keyboard, and that ungrouped all those vectors. Excuse me. Let me go into full screen here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn that, deselect everything. And I'm going to choose every other vector. Just select every other vector here. Then I'm going to come over to Mirror, Selected Objects. I do not want to create a mirrored copy. I do not want to flip about the job center. I want them to stay where they are. But I want to flip them vertical, and we end up with that. Almost a quilted pattern. Now, Control A to select them all. Tap the letter G to group those vectors. Come back over here, and I'm going to create a new toolpath. I'm not going to use that same one because I want to save that. And then I'm not going to change any criteria here. And we'll call this, I'll call it Core Box 2. Calculate. Now let's see what this does. And we'll preview it. And again, we get into these situations where if you just get in an experiment and play around with it, you'd be amazed at what you can come up with by accident, you know? And that's what this is. This is an accident. I have absolutely no idea what this is going to look like when it's done. But it's something to play around with. And by using a V bit on the first one and now using a core box bit here, hopefully I've kind of given you some idea that this is not a limited toolpath. You can use various sculpting tools. You could use an OG bit. You could use a bowl and tray bit. This core box bit makes a pattern that is very cool. And I kind of like it. A person could even do a little bit of playing around here. Kurt says, now take this design and epoxy the cutting area. Yeah, go ahead. Get on it, Kurt. But if you really wanted to play around with it here, what a person could do would be take, oh, I don't know, let's go with just some simple line vectors of a lily flower or a daisy flower and do a linear array to put one in the center of each one of these. That may get a little bit busy, but you get my point. It could be done. You could put a flourish in the center of each one of these. The only thing you'd have to remember is you would have to make it small enough to where the diameter of that bit didn't cut into your artwork. Okay, a ball and tray bit. It's a bowl and tray bit, BOWL. And what it is, Sargon, is I'll show you the one I have here, the two I have here. It is not Sargon, excuse me, AL. I appreciate. I apologize for that. You can see by the vector here that represents its profile. Imagine a ball nose with a wide, flat bottom. It's used to carve out bowls or trays that will have a flat bottom. It's a large bit. This one here, as a matter of fact, it was 1.25 inches in diameter. And it's for hollowing out large areas, but it'll also leave a radiused edge where the bottom of the tray meets the side. So they work really well. I like using my bowl and tray bit. So as a matter of fact, you know what? Let's see what that would look like with using that bowl and tray bit. Close the preview and I'll change out the bit. Let's go for my 1.25 inch bowl and tray. We'll select that. Edit the passes to 1. Okay. And I know that bit will cut 1/4 inch. And we'll go 1.5 bowl and tray. Calculate it. Oh, I got to select vectors too. There we go. Now let's try it again, Mark. All right. And let's see what that does. That's going to leave a flat bottom instead of that rounded bottom. Eighth center, it's not so much gentler on softer fibers. It's a pretty aggressive bit. That large diameter is pretty aggressive. It will cut pine fairly reasonably, but I wouldn't call it any gentler than any other bit. It just the main advantage to using it versus a ball nose or a core box bit is the fact that it leaves down in here, it leaves a flat bottom with these radiused edges over here. Now that actually looks pretty decent. Let me get it over here, spin it around, and we'll zoom in. It's got a nice flat bottom there, but then these edges here are radiused. That actually looks pretty cool. I kind of like that. So yeah, it'll do all kinds of neat things. So that's a pretty basic design. That's a pretty basic pattern. But we're going to have to think about a couple of things here. Let me go in and get back over here into my Toolpath. And now that I have modified these vectors, even though I've grouped them, I can't go back and change them with the vector texture tool. So what I'll have to do is I'm going to create a new layer. So I'll add a new layer, and I'll just let it be called layer 2, hit enter. I'm going to make it active, and I'm going to turn off layer 1. And we're going to put these new vectors over here. Let's go back up, and none of my criteria has changed. The form remembers the last criteria you used. RB says you could almost simulate diamond plate. Yes, you could. You'd have to get in and play with it. You'll play with the angle, your spacing, and various other things. And then you would also have to take into account the diameter of the bit that you're going to use. So let's get over here and let's play with some of the spacing a little bit. Let's bring that down to about 1 point. No, let's leave that at 2. Let's leave that at 2.0. What we'll do is we'll set our variation at about 2 inches. I'm not going to change anything else. Let's preview it. And now we can see we have a variable distance here. Some of these spaces are really wide. Others are more narrow. But they will be a max of 2 inches apart. Let me drag it up some more, and we'll hit preview. And now we see some of them are real close together, but they're no more than 2 inches apart. That's our max. The thing to remember, as soon as you start playing with variations in spacing, parameters, wavelength, and noise, the minute you start playing with these, every time you hit the preview button, you're going to get a different image. You're going to get different vectors because all of these are generated at random, especially true of the noise and your variation on your line spacing. So if you like this, place those vectors on a layer and save it. But as you can see, every time I hit that preview button without making any changes, I get a different pattern. It's the same thing with noise. I'll come over here and I'll adjust my noise about halfway up, and I'll preview it. Now, if I hit preview again, I'm going to get a different pattern. Every time I hit a preview, it generates a new random pattern. So when you find a pattern that you like, by all means, save it. You can put it on its own layer and not touch it. You could even copy those vectors into a new project. Okay, you could even create a template using those settings. So that's just something to keep in mind. Let's tighten up this wavelength a little bit since we're playing with noise. And let's go with a little bit higher amplitude. Let's go with 6-inch amplitude. And let's preview that. And we've got a big jagged mess out here. Let's go with a little bit more like that. Let's try that one there. We're going to place the vectors on layer 2. Click OK. Now, when I go up to layer 2, turn it off. There they are. Let's make layer 2 the active layer, shut off layer 1. And now I just click anywhere in here. Now, this kind of a pattern would be way, way, way too busy to use that kind of a large bit. It's basically going to just carve most of the surface of the material away, and you wouldn't really see anything. So what we'll do with this one is I'll come back and do a profile toolpath, and I'm going to use my 90-degree V-bit again. Select that. Cutting foam, let's go 1 for this demonstration. And again, cutting on the vector. The 90-degree V-bit is probably going to be too big. It's going to remove large chunks of material out of here. But let's see what we get. This is noise 90-degree. Let's calculate. Let's just see what we've got. And we'll preview. And this is going to take quite a bit here. See what we get. Then we'll okay, is that it? That's it. All right. I'm not much for it, but it's giving me some ideas. We've got large flat areas out here. I don't know if I like that. I really don't know if I like that. But we're playing around. Let's reset the preview. Let's do another. Oops. Make sure we got our vectors selected. We'll do another profile toolpath, but this time, instead of using a V-bit, let's try, just for giggles, an 1/8-inch tapered ball nose and see what we get. And one pass on the vector. And we'll go with 0.125 TBN. And let's see what we get. And we'll preview that. We've got a slightly different pattern here. It's still just as jagged, but that we don't have that V groove. But we can look at that. We can see we've got some real problem areas in here where we've got some of these ridges. These are going to break out, especially when it comes time to do any cleanup, sanding, or what have you. I don't think that would be a good idea. Something like this would be better served carving real shallow with a V-bit. But we're getting to play around. But this gives me another idea. which is going to kind of dovetail in with the demonstration. Yeah, carve a tiny skier in there. The ultimate mogul challenge. Yeah, really. This makes the Alps look like a speed bump, right? But this gives me another idea, and that brings about the project that I had picked out to demonstrate this whole toolpath with. Let me go ahead and bring that. This is the one. And let's, okay, Butch Miller, you got a good point here. Let's take a look at some of these. You'd be surprised. Let's check out the cut time on all of these different toolpaths that I've calculated. We'll just go up here to toolpath summary. The 90-degree V-bit is going to be 15 minutes. The 2 1/4 inch core box bit will be 9 minutes. The core box 2 would be another 9 minutes. The bowl and tray bit would be 12 minutes. The 90-degree V-bit with the noise is 2.5 hours. The 1/8 tapered ball nose is an hour and a half. Now remember, your feeds and speeds will determine this, as well as your rapid rates and how big the panel is. Remember, this is 48 inches wide, 24 tall. So the bigger bit, nine minutes for that core box bit to carve that pattern, and 9 minutes for the core box bit to cut that pattern. If you tried to do this in 3D, you could be there for hours. So this is where 2D and 2.5D really comes in handy. Really comes in handy. It's very difficult to make 3D profitable. I'm not saying you can't do it, just saying it's difficult to do. So let me get into a practical application where this would actually be used. Okay, I've got a piece of material here that is 8 by 16, 8 inches high and wide, 16 inches long. I've got let's cancel that. I've got a rectangle here. This is going to be my profile cutout, and it is 15 by 7. Close. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another rectangle. I'm going to anchor the center of the rectangle on my X0, Y0, and I'm going to make it 14 by 6. And I'm going to do radius internal corners, and I want that to be a 1-inch radius. Okay, let's create that, and there we've got it right there. Okay, close that. Now, something I didn't show you on the other, well, wait a minute. Let me get some text in here first. We'll go ahead and we'll create some text. Then I'll go ahead and I'll use the Arial bold, and I'll just type my name. No, I'm gonna go lowercase here. Yeah, there we go. All right, and we'll close that. I'll size it up a little bit better. Center it. Yeah, that looks okay. I'm not going to get sharp insides. We'll see what we get. Okay. Something I didn't show you is if I select a vector and come into the vector texture tool, it will limit that texturing to right here. It won't go any further than that. Now I have text here Let's select that text. It should only apply the vector to the areas around the text, but we'll see. I'm going to go with 0 degree angle. I'm going to go for real tiny. Let's go 0.25. Max spacing, high variable. Amplitude, I'm going to make it very, very low. So we're going to go 0.010. My wavelength, I'm going to make 16. And I'm going to leave the noise right here. And I'm going to put the vectors on well, no, I don't need to because this is the only thing I've got going here. And let's preview this. It created these vectors right in here, but it did not put them inside my text. Okay. I'm going to preview again. I don't know. I might want to change my spacing a little bit. Let's make it 0.125 and let's preview that. That's better. That's more what I had in mind. Okay. I'm going to select that. Now you're thinking, what the heck have you just done? Well, let's go over here and let's check this out. And let's see what we get. I'm going to do a profile toolpath. No, I'm not going to do a profile toolpath. I'm going to get into the texturing toolpath. Okay. We'll use the vector texturing, or we'll use the texturing toolpath with the selected vectors. Now that just shut off most of this down here, just grayed it out. I have a max cut depth open to me. What I need to do is go in here and I'm going to select my 90-degree V-bit. And there it is. Boom. I'll select that. My start depth is going to be 0. I'm going to use the selected vectors as my pattern. That's why I don't get any choices down here. I'm going to go with a max cut depth of point. How deep do I want to make this? I want to go 0.25. Let's just see what it looks like. And my minimum depth, I'm going to bring that down to about 0.2-ish. Okay, 0.205. I do need to set I can't set a vector boundary offset. And I need to. We'll see what happens. Ah, man. Oh, let me try selecting a boundary vector. See if that makes any difference. Nope, it won't let me do it. Okay. All right. Well, I may have to just offset this in. We'll see what happens. And we'll call it texture. We'll calculate it. Now, if you're carving in foam, one of the default texture backgrounds when carving in foam is a artificial wood grain. There are many, many ways of carving a wood grain. And what I'm attempting to do here is simulate one of those. You can get 3D components, 3D wood grain components, but 3D carving takes a long time. So let's see if this looks a bit like wood grain. Way too deep. Way, way, way too deep. So I'll let it go ahead and cut. I think I'm going to jump back and do a 0.125. And I also need to offset some vectors because it's going right into my text, which I don't want it to do. It's also carving into my edges, which I don't want it to do. But this looks, the pattern itself looks like wood grain. So I don't know, I think I would tighten that up a little bit. And I don't like how it's carved into my letters. I need to be able to use vector offset on this. It would leave kind of an uncarved halo effect around here, but that's okay. So let me reset that preview. Number one, it's way too deep. Let's go with 1/8 of an inch instead of 1/4 of an inch. And I still can't select a vector boundary. That's okay. We'll calculate that and see if that, reset the preview, and we'll see if that's any better. Well, it's a lot better on that score. Okay. We're all right there. Okay. We're a little bit better, but it could be a heck of a lot cleaner. So let me reset the preview. Let's close that, go back over to the drawing side into the 2D view. And I'm going to select my outer boundary vector here. And I'm going to offset that. I'm going to offset it inwards by 1/4 of an inch. No. Yes, I'm going to offset it inwards by 1/4 of an inch. Inward, 1/4 of an inch, offset. All right. Close that. Whoops, didn't need to close it. Oh well. Now, nope, I'm going to select. I want to go in and select my text. There we go. And I'm going to offset that outward by 1/8 of an inch. Create sharp offset corners, and we'll go there. All right. Yes. Okay, now let me go back over here, go into my texture toolpath. No. Close. I forgot to do one thing. Go into my texture toolpath with that selected, with this texture selected. But now I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to select my offsets. Preview. Oops, I got to do each vector, looks like. All right, that's fine. Shift, Shift, Shift. I have to do each offset. Yes. Okay, and I'm also, yeah, I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit. Preview. There we go. Okay. So now it's not going to cut all the way out to here. So we'll come back over here, select that, and let's go with 0.1. Calculate it. Now let's see what we get. There's a better start. It didn't go into the, I didn't select it. That's why. Close. Let's go back in and select the inside island. Boy. Nope. All right. I have to go back over here. Back over to this. All right. Now let's try this again. I'm going to select all of my offsets. I forgot to do the inside offset on this letter A. All right. I have all those selected. Preview it. There we go. Now I have my texture in there. Okay. Now come over, select that texture. Nothing else will change. Calculate, reset the preview, try it again. That's a little bit better. And we have more of a wood grain look. Yeah, it did. Now, I'm going to select this vector, close my preview, do a, let's see, what was my spacing here? I think my spacing on here was a 1/8 of an inch. No, my spacing here was 1/4 of an inch. This was an 1/8 of an inch. All right. I'm going to do a profile cutting to the inside. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch end mill. Boom. Yes. 1/8 inch end mill cutting to the side. Select. And we're going to cut to 0.1. And I'm not gonna get sharp corner here, but that's all right. And we will calculate that. And we'll preview it. Yeah, I need to go with a 1/4 inch end mill. I thought I could get away with an 1/8 inch. Yep, I'm gonna need a 1/4 inch. Okay, undo last. Profile. We'll go with a 1/4 inch end mill. This is where you experiment. All right, calculate that. Preview it. And that cleaned that right up, giving us a kind of a halo effect around that texture. And now I'll do the same thing with my text. Close, do a profile to the outside with an 1/8 inch end mill. Select and 0.1 depth. Calculate. Preview that. Cleaned it all right up and left me a halo around the letters inside and out. Now, one last toolpath will be cut out. Z equals, and we'll use a 1/4 inch end mill to cut that out. Select, edit passes. That 3 passes is okay. And there's that. Preview. And there's a little sign for my bedroom door. So let's do a little bit of playing around here. We have a texture. Let's make that color brown. No, not that one. Cutout doesn't get any fill. Let's do a texture. We'll make that brown. And we'll make the material Yeah, the material is fine. Uncheck it, and there we go. We can make the material blue, and we'll make this one white, and we'll make this one white. And personally, I would paint this white as well, but that's just me. So there's that. That's a whole nother way of looking at it. Using a V-bit to make a wood grain pattern. Let's just check that out. That's a 40-minute carve. 3D is going to be a lot longer than that. 3D will take a lot longer than that. Now, there is another way and another tool that you can use with the texturing Toolpath or vector textures, etc. And that is there's a gadget. Let me see. I don't have it here. I don't have it installed here. Okay. But I know where to get it. And that is over here on Vectric gadget library. Now, what you'll need to do is I just Google searched Vectric gadgets because it depends on which version of the software you're running. If you're running version 10, you want the gadgets that are compatible with version 10. If you're running version 11, 11.5, you want gadgets that are compatible with version 11. So what we're looking for is and here's previous versions here, version 10, version 9, version 8. You want gadgets that are compatible with your version. If you're using version 10, you need version 10. Version 11, 9, and 8 will not work. May work a little bit, but not work the way it's supposed to work. We're going to use a tool pathing gadget. And we're going to use the texture toolbox. We'll click on that. We'll download the gadget. Now, I'm going to stop right here because we're already over time. We've got a few questions over here that I need to answer. If you'd like, we can get into the texturing toolbox next week. If not, we won't bother with it. But it is very cool. Gadgets are only available to V-carve Pro and Aspire. V-carve Desktop does not support gadgets. You cannot use this toolbox at all. So if you don't see the gadget menu up here, you're running V-carve Desktop. That's why you don't see it. So let's go ahead and get into some of these questions. Dwayne Ruthig is asking, am I having a show next week? That's Easter Sunday. Yes, I will. I know that it is a major holiday, but those who choose can come be here. Those who choose not to, I understand 100%. It's a very important holiday. But yes, I'll be here. So normal time for about an hour. Let's see here. Dave Blackburn is asking, can you distort the vectors? Yes. Let me get into which one do I want to do. I'll do this one here. So let's bring it back. I'm going to turn on layer 1, make it active, turn off layer 2. So Can you distort? You certainly can. Let's select these vectors, and I believe I have to ungroup them. So let's ungroup just to make sure. With them selected, I'll go into the Distort tool in a bounding box. Apply. Okay. Now I'm going to edit the envelope, meaning I can distort up here, zoom out, bring this way out here, bring that down like so, grab that and drag it up, grab my center point and drag it in. And let's bring this out like so there. All right, let's do that. Put a point there and drag it inwards. So we're all kinds of goofy and distorted. All right. It almost looks like spider webs. It also almost looks like fishnets. Absolutely. So, you know, you can distort all of this because once the vector, excuse me, and remember, once you get a pattern that you like, let's bring that over here so that the whole panel is covered again. You have to bake that distortion. Then you can close it. And we're waiting on the computer. There we go. Okay. So now that's all set. From here, what I would do personally is I would create another rectangle. And what I would do is go up here to draw a rectangle tool. And I want to go X plus 1 equals then Y plus 1 equals, and create that, whoops, square edges. So Control Z, square corners. There we go. Close that. Then hold down Shift and select that outer vector I just created. Come over here under Edit Object, second row, fourth icon in, Trim. Trim the selected vectors to the last vector selected. Clear outside the boundary. Make sure Refit Curves after clipping is not checked. Clear, and it trims all those vectors to this rectangle. But it doesn't try to connect it to the rectangle. So now I can select, well, what I would do would be Control A to select all, hold down Shift, deselect the rectangle, then group those vectors again. And you see what we got. So yes, the long answer to the short question is yes, you can distort those vectors. All right. Let me come out of full screen, but I'll leave this up because I have a feeling the next ones. Let's see. Kurt is asking, can a vector texture be applied within a vector boundary? Yes. Example, I want a quarter of the total material to have one pattern, then add another unique pattern to another quarter. Yes, absolutely. You can. Let me create a new layer, and we'll just call that layer 3. Make it the active layer, turn off the others. And let's see, we'll do a circle over here, and I'll, come on. There we go, move and transform. We'll put that there. Click off, I'll draw a rectangle out here. Close, we'll make a triangle right there. And let's see, a star over here. All right, they're not placed anywhere in particular, although that needs to come back down a little bit right there, like so. If I go into the vector texture tool and select a vector, whatever I do out here is going to be put inside that vector. Okay. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's hide that and go back over here. So we'll hit preview, and you see that's the only one that is affected. So I could select another vector, get rid of the noise, drop the variation, bring this to 0.125 and an amplitude of 50 thou, and preview it, and that's the texture that's going to be there. And then here we'll go introduce some variation, and we're going to do 1 inch amplitude and wavelength way down about 0.64. Preview that one. So my point being is you can have different textures all over the same piece. What you have to do, however, is this is a preview. You have to click OK. So now I've got the texture there. Okay. Go back in, select this one, play around, and bring in some noise. And that's in that circle. Preview. Okay. Okay. Now I had that selected. I think you should probably do these on separate layers. Now let's see if I go into vector selection. Okay, it didn't select these. All right. Let's make some change. Preview. Okay, there we go. I still had it selected. All right, select that. And lots of variation. -48, lots of noise. Preview, and okay. So yes, you can put different textures and into different vectors, all within the same project. So let's see here. I hope that answers your question, Kurt. All right, Robert Hodge. Yes, I hope you can get an opportunity to talk a little bit about 3D carving and ghosting effects. I'm not going to be able to get to it today. I will try to next week. If I can't get to it next week, I will dedicate an entire episode to it because that is a problem. But I think I can do it next week because the gadget, even including installing the gadget, is not going to take that long to talk about. So I just have run out of time for today. So Brian is wanting to know, can you overlap shapes somehow with different textures? Yes. What you would have to do, for instance, in this case, you would take both of these, move and transform, and let's say we put that in the middle of the circle here. You could conceivably cut it, but would you really want to? You know what I mean? You would have to do some pretty creative tool pathing because each one of these is going to cut a little bit different. Now, what you could do is create this star inside this circle before the texture was created, and then select the circle and star and create the texture around that star. Then create the star separate down here, create the texture within it, then drag that up and place it in there, if that makes any sense. So you could, let me go back to my other project here. This one, I could go into the 2D view and I could texture the top of the text, for example, and then carve the wood grain background and then a different texture on the text. But that's because I created this texture around the text. So it's not carving into the text, if that makes any sense. Okay. So, again, this, we all have our taste, we all have our style, but sometimes less is more, if that makes any sense. And I don't know. I think too many textures can sometimes be a distraction. But yes, you can combine them if you'd like. I mean, it's your trip, so go for it. Just know the main takeaways are, if you go in to the vector texture tool and you make changes, every time you hit that preview button, it's going to change the pattern. You're going to get a different pattern out here. So even if you use identical numbers, because I saw you guys in here doing, oh, try this amount of noise, try this, rotate this and do that and the other. You're all getting different patterns, unless it's very simple. If you have no variation, you have no noise, then you'll get identical patterns. But if you've got any noise or any variation in there, you're all getting different patterns. So if you come up with something cool, save it. Save it as a template or just as a regular CRV or CRV 3D file. Because the odds of you getting that exact texture are slim to none. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up for today. Next week, I'll get into the gadget, and I will try to take care of your question about the ghosting on 3D. Robert, Mr. Hodges. Channel members, tomorrow we've got a little bit of unfinished business to get into. Also want to remind you that Corbin Dunn is going to be our guest on April 15th. If you don't know who Corbin Dunn is, well, number one, shame on you. Number two, get over to Corbin Dunn's channel. I will link him in the description of this live stream as soon as we're finished here. The guy's a wizard. He's got some great work holding techniques. He's got some great projects that are just absolutely fantastic. And if you're not subscribed to his channel, get over there and get it done. Tomorrow, what we're going to do, like I said, we got some unfinished business to take care of. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you want information on how to become a channel member so you can access these members only live streams, hit that join button down there by the subscribe button. A panel will pop up and a video will play that'll tell you all about channel membership. Hitting that join button does not sign you up for anything. It's just how you get some information on it. So, Ray, yes, sir, I am. I still will have a session. I'm going to plan it that way. You know how real life is. I've got a lot of relatives here, subject to change, but as it sits right now, I'm planning on it. So if you don't see a link next week, you know something happened and my plans change. But I do plan on having another live session next Sunday. Next week, again, we'll get into the texture toolbox gadget. For everybody else, John Cousins, my buddy over at What If I Could Scroll, today is his birthday. So he's got a live stream going right now. As soon as this live stream ends, YouTube is automatically going to redirect you over to his channel. Do me a favor, drop in and tell him happy birthday. He's a good guy. He's good people. Everybody else, I'll see you next week. Members, I'll see you tomorrow. I think that's it. Yep. Okay. Y'all take care. Have a great rest of your week. And keep doing it. Just keep practicing. Get in there and play with this. It's a lot of fun. You can't mess it up because you're going to get a different result every time you try. You can't mess it up. Have a good one. Thank you.